A canine German Shepherd returns to the shelter after retirement and refuses to eat until a boy with autism visits. He had once been the pride of the Forstron, intelligent and fearless. A canine German Shepherd who saved lives, took down criminals, and never once hesitated in the line of duty. But when age caught up with him, and the sirens faded, he was quietly returned to the shelter that trained him, forgotten, broken, and alone. Days passed, he refused to eat, refused to engage. His eyes lost their fire. Shelter workers feared the worst. But everything changed the moment a silent little boy with autism walked through the door. What happened next left everyone in the room in tears and reminded the world that some bonds don't need words. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. The fluorescent lights in the county canine shelter buzzed softly overhead, casting a sterile glow across rows of kennels. Dogs barked, whimpered, and paced. But in kennel number 14, there was only silence. Ranger lay curled in the back corner, his once posture now diminished into something almost ghost-like. His coat, thick sable black and tan, had lost its luster. His ribs were starting to show, and though his ears still stood alert, his eyes, they were different now. They were dull, tired, resigned. He hadn't touched food in 4 days. Before this, Ranger had lived a life of purpose. He had served on the Memphis Police Department's K-9 unit for nearly 8 years, working beside Officer Tom Granger. Together, they had taken down drug rings, rescued missing children, and walked headfirst into danger more times than anyone could count. Ranger had been fearless, focused, and completely loyal. He was the kind of dog that didn't just follow commands, he anticipated them. But when Officer Granger was diagnosed with late-stage cancer, everything changed. There was no one else in the department able or willing to adopt Ranger. He was too old to retrain, too trained to be a pet for just anyone. So when Tom passed away, Ranger was quietly transported back to the shelter where he'd been born, as if all those years of service were just erased. At first, the staff were thrilled to see him. Ranger's name was on a plaque near the entrance. He was something of a legend there. But within days, excitement turned to worry. He didn't bark, didn't react, didn't eat. Not even the fresh beef stew they brought in special from a local cafe could rouse his appetite. "He's grieving," said Marie, one of the caretakers, brushing her hand gently over the bars of his kennel, "and maybe he's given up." They tried everything: more comfortable bedding, letting him outside longer, even playing audio clips of Officer Granger's voice from old training sessions. Ranger would perk up for a second, then curl back into himself. Marie left the shelter every evening with a knot in her chest. She had worked there for 15 years, seen dogs survive abuse, starvation, even roadside shootings. But this, watching a loyal soul choose to stop living, it broke her. One Wednesday morning, a woman named Claudia Rodriguez walked in, holding the hand of her 10-year-old son, Leo. He wore noise-canceling headphones and didn't make eye contact with anyone. Claudia had called ahead. She was a single mother, recently moved from Austin, and had heard about the shelter's therapy dog pairing program. Leo had autism and hadn't spoken a full sentence in over a year. He was highly sensitive to noise, touch, and strangers. But, strangely, he'd always been drawn to animals, especially dogs. Claudia had tried to introduce him to a golden retriever once, but Leo froze. Another time, a lab puppy had barked too loudly, and he'd retreated for days. But she refused to give up. She had read story after story about how service dogs had transformed the lives of autistic children, how nonverbal kids had started to communicate because of a connection that was never forced, only felt. She was hoping, praying. Marie greeted them gently, explained how the program worked, and began leading them past the kennels. Leo clung to his mother's hand, eyes wide, face unreadable. They passed kennel after kennel. Nothing. But then, they reached #14. Ranger was awake, but still motionless. Marie began to walk past, but Leo stopped, dead in his tracks. He slowly stepped toward the kennel, eyes fixed on Ranger. And then, something happened that no one could explain, not then, and not even later. Ranger lifted his head, and for the first time in days, he stood up. Marie gasped. Claudia froze. Leo took one slow step closer and crouched. His tiny fingers reached through the bars, palm open, not to pet, just to offer something, an invitation. Ranger sniffed, and then gently, deliberately, he pressed his snout into the boy's hand. No one spoke. Leo didn't look away. Ranger didn't move back. For nearly a full minute, they just stayed like that, two souls. One small and quiet, the other old and wounded, meeting in a silence that spoke louder than any words. Then, Leo did something else. He whispered, not a full sentence, just one word. But it was the first word Claudia had heard him say in over a year. Friend. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Marie had to steady herself. Ranger let out a sound that was almost a sigh, a low, soft woof. He lowered himself again, but this time, his eyes didn't look distant. They were watching Leo, following him. When Claudia asked if they could return the next day, Marie didn't hesitate. Please do. As they walked out, Ranger remained by the kennel door, eyes locked on the path where the boy had gone. And when Marie returned later with his food, expecting the usual untouched bowl, she found it licked clean. Ranger had eaten. The shelter filled with a kind of stunned joy. But Marie wasn't surprised. Somehow, deep inside her, she knew. Ranger had found a reason again, and the boy who barely spoke, he had just made his first friend. The next day, Claudia and Leo returned to the shelter just as the morning sun broke through the clouds. Claudia had packed snacks, extra headphones, and a small blue notebook filled with drawings Leo had done the night before. Each one a different dog with sad eyes and big ears. But one stood out. A sketch in charcoal pencil of a German shepherd behind bars, with a boy's hand reaching toward him. Claudia recognized it instantly. It was Ranger. Marie greeted them at the door, her usual gentle demeanor charged with something. New hope. He's been pacing since you left, she said, smiling. Didn't sleep much last night. He kept going to the kennel door, then back to the corner, then back again. Leo said nothing, but he walked in on his own, this time without holding his mother's hand. As they approached kennel number 14, Ranger was already standing. He pressed his nose to the bars and let out a short, low sound, a mix between a whimper and a huff, as if he was trying to say, "You're late." Leo crouched again, just like before. And again, the German shepherd leaned into the boy's hand. But this time, Leo didn't just touch him. He looked into Ranger's eyes, tilted his head slightly, and smiled. Marie noticed something extraordinary. Ranger's tail moved. Slowly, just once. But it moved. That afternoon, the staff brought Ranger into the visitation room, a space designed to feel more like a home than a shelter, with couches, throw rugs, and toys. Leo walked in first, sat on the floor, and waited. Ranger entered cautiously, but when he saw the boy, something in him relaxed. He walked straight over and lay down with a heavy sigh, resting his head just inches from Leo's leg. The boy gently removed his headphones. He didn't flinch. No tears, no retreat. Just quiet, mutual understanding. Marie, watching from the corner, blinked back tears. It's like they're the same, she whispered to Claudia, both of them struggling to connect with the world, but somehow able to see each other. Claudia nodded, her eyes never leaving her son. He doesn't connect like this with people, not even me, not in this way. Leo took a small toy car from his pocket and began driving it slowly across the floor. Ranger watched intently, his ears twitching. When Leo paused, the dog gently nudged the car with his nose, sending it forward again. Leo giggled just once, a quiet, sharp sound that made Claudia's heart ache with joy. In the following days, the visits became routine. Every morning, Leo would wake up, pack his bag, and wait by the door without being asked. And every day, Ranger would perk up the moment he heard the boy's footsteps coming down the corridor. It was as if the two had written a secret language between them. No commands, no training, just a bond. By the end of the first week, Leo began speaking more, not in full sentences, but in soft words. He whispered only around Ranger. "Sit, good boy. Stay up." Marie began documenting the changes. Unable to believe what she was seeing, Ranger changed too. He was eating twice a day. He wagged his tail freely now when Leo was near. He even started responding to toys again, gently tugging on a rope that Leo would offer, carefully enough to keep from startling the boy, but engaged enough to show he remembered how to play. But not everyone believed this progress was enough. "I'm worried about the pairing," said Dr. Keene, the shelter's head behavior. Ranger's still a retired canine. He's been through intense situations. He's aging. He's experienced loss and grief. And the boy, he's fragile. Marie didn't argue. Instead, she brought in a specialist, a woman named Dr. Melissa Trent, who worked with therapy animals and autistic children in Tennessee. She arrived on a Friday morning and observed the pair for several hours. She watched Ranger lay beside Leo as the boy colored. She watched Leo hum a soft tune that Ranger matched with low breathing. She watched the boy speak in gentle, halting phrases while brushing Ranger's fur. By the end of the session, Dr. Trent stood and said, "This is not typical, but it's real. There's a therapeutic connection here that I would classify as exceptional." Claudia wept with relief. The shelter board convened to review the case. Marie made her case with passion and clarity, backed by Dr. Trent's written report. Claudia submitted everything she could. Leo's improved speech patterns, therapist's notes, sketches Leo had done of Ranger with smiley faces drawn over his own. Still, the board was cautious. Then something unexpected happened. Leo spoke. In front of the board, he entered the meeting with Claudia, holding a folder of drawings. Ranger sat beside him, calm, loyal, and still. Leo opened the folder, pulled out the sketch of Ranger behind bars, and said, clearly, he was a hero. He still is. He saved people, and now he saves me. There was a long silence, and then someone stood up. It was one of the oldest board members, a retired police chief. He walked around the table, knelt in front of Leo, and said, "Son, you just gave us the best reason we'll ever need." And with that, the adoption was approved. Ranger would go home, not to a place of concrete floors and metal bars, but to a small blue house with a backyard, a quiet boy, and a love so deep it didn't need commands to be understood. He had found his purpose again, and this time he would never be sent away. The day Ranger went home was quiet, but somehow felt monumental. There were no balloons or big send-offs, just the click of a leash, the gentle creak of the shelter door opening, and the sound of Ranger's paws stepping into a world that was finally his again. Leo stood beside him, holding the leash with a calm assurance that hadn't existed even a month earlier. He didn't flinch when Ranger barked softly at a squirrel or when a car engine revved too loudly on the street. Instead, he reached out, touched the dog's shoulder gently, and whispered, "It's okay. You're with me now." It was their first walk as a team. As family. Claudia followed behind, her heart stretched between gratitude and disbelief. There had been so many nights when she had questioned everything: her parenting, her decisions, her ability to give Leo what he needed. But this dog, this old, quiet soul, had done what no specialist, no therapy, no medication had managed. He had seen her son, connected with him, and now he was going home with them. Their house was small, tucked into a peaceful cul-de-sac on the edge of town. It had a fenced yard, lots of shade, and a porch that caught the golden hour light in the most perfect way. Ranger sniffed everything as they arrived: the mailbox, Bagras, the flower pots, and then looked at Leo, waiting. Leo opened the door himself. "Come on," he said softly. Ranger stepped inside like he had always belonged there. The first few days were quiet. No one forced anything. Claudia gave them space. Leo moved about the house with a peaceful confidence she had never seen before, and Ranger followed him like a shadow, always close, but never overbearing. At night, Leo would lie on the floor, next to Ranger's bed, his small hands tracing the outline of the dog's paw or the curve of his ear. He didn't speak much, but his presence was constant, and Ranger, for his part, watched over the boy like it was his life's purpose. And in many ways, it was. Claudia began journaling the changes, partly to document progress for Leo's therapist, partly because she couldn't believe them herself. Day 4, Leo asked for Ranger when he woke up, called him my best. Day 7, Leo let me hug him while Ranger was in the room. He didn't pull away. Day 9, Ranger barked at a thunderclap. Leo put his headphones on, then reached to pet him. Leo comforted him. It wasn't just Leo who was changing, Ranger was, too. His eyes had regained their depth. He was eating well, sleeping soundly, and began wagging his tail more freely. Sometimes he'd play fetch, though only with Leo. Sometimes he'd nudge a toy toward Claudia, as if to say, "You're part of this too." But the most profound change came on a Tuesday afternoon. Nearly 2 weeks after Ranger arrived, Claudia had just finished making lunch. She was standing at the kitchen sink when she heard it. Laughter. Pure, loud, joyful. She turned, stunned. Leo was outside in the backyard, tossing a ball toward Ranger, who leapt into the air to catch it. They tumbled together in the grass. Leo clapped and shouted, "Again, again," and Ranger barked once, tail wagging like a puppy's. Tears filled her eyes. For years, Claudia had prayed for a moment like this, a sound like that. Her boy, free in his own body, connected to the world around him, and all of it, because of a dog who had nearly given up on life. That night, Leo fell asleep on the couch. Ranger curled beside him. Claudia took a picture of the boy, peaceful and open, the dog guarding him like a knight. She posted it quietly on a community board, captioned, "Sometimes, healing comes with 4 legs and a broken heart." The photo went viral. Within a week, local news was at their door. They interviewed Claudia in the living room. She told the story from the beginning: how Ranger had refused to eat, how Leo had drawn him before they'd even met, how their first touch changed everything. Then they interviewed Marie from the shelter. "I've never seen a connection like that," she said. "It was like they were 2 puzzle pieces that finally found their place." And then they interviewed Leo. He wore a button-up shirt and sat on the porch beside Ranger. The reporter asked him what Ranger meant to him. Leo paused, then said clearly, "He listens. Even when I don't talk." The reporter choked up. The segment aired that night and was picked up nationally within days. Offers poured in. Donations to the shelter tripled. Autism organizations reached out to Claudia, asking if she'd speak at events, write for their newsletters. A publisher offered a children's book deal based on Leo and Ranger's story. But Claudia said no to most of it. "I don't want this to become a performance," she told her sister over the phone. "This isn't a miracle. It's a friendship, and that's sacred." Still, she did agree to one thing: a visit to Leo's school. It was a small public elementary where Leo had struggled for years, struggled to speak, to sit still, to engage. Now, the school counselor wanted him to visit with Ranger and talk to the class. Claudia hesitated, but Leo, he said yes. The day of the visit, Leo wore his favorite shirt, green with tiny German shepherds printed on it. Ranger wore a vest that read "Therapy Dog in Training," though everyone there already knew he had passed that test 1,000 times over. They walked into the classroom. 20 children stared. Leo didn't hide, didn't panic. Instead, he stepped forward, looked at his teacher and said, "This is Ranger. He's my best friend. He used to be scared, like me, but now, we're not scared anymore." Silence. Then applause, not because the students understood everything, but because they felt it. That day, Leo stayed the entire class. Ranger lay beside him. Calm as ever. One boy who struggled with his own speech issues came up afterward and hugged Ranger, whispering, "You're cool." It was small but enormous, and Claudia realized Ranger wasn't just helping Leo find his voice. He was helping others find theirs too. Months passed. Fall came, then winter. The backyard filled with leaves. Ranger grew a little slower, a little stiffer in the mornings, but still as present and loyal as ever. And Leo, he was thriving. His therapist called it an emotional awakening. He still had challenges, sensory overload, anxiety, but now he had a tool, a protector, a bridge. And one night, as Claudia tucked him into bed, he said, "I don't want him to die." She froze. "Sweetheart, I know he's old," Leo whispered, "but maybe, when I'm older, I can help dogs like him." Her throat tightened. "You'd be good at that." He nodded. "Because I know how to be quiet." And in that moment, Claudia realized something powerful. Leo's silence had never been a flaw, it had been his strength, and Ranger had simply understood it first. Spring arrived slowly that year, as if the earth itself needed time to thaw, not from cold, but from everything that had passed. In Claudia's home, life had settled into a new kind of rhythm. Leo was attending school more regularly, speaking in full, though quiet, sentences. His drawings lined the hallway, dozens of pictures of him and Ranger under blue skies. By rivers, in dreams. Ranger had grown visibly older. His muzzle had turned silver gray, his steps slower, his eyes heavier. Yet every morning, when Leo stepped out of bed, Ranger was there, tail thumping once, then again, and when Leo returned home from school, Ranger still managed to trot to the door and greet him, as if those were the two most important tasks of the day. One Saturday afternoon, Claudia received a letter in the mail. The envelope was thick, formal. Inside was an embossed seal from the National Canine Retirement Trust, a division of the Memphis Police Department. Confused, she sat at the kitchen table and opened the letter. What she read made her chest tighten. It wasn't just a formality, it was a request. Ranger's former handler officer Tom Granger had been posthumously awarded a citation for bravery, and the department planned a commemorative event. They wanted Ranger present, not just as a symbol but as part of a final honor to the fallen officer. Claudia reread the letter 3 times. Part of her felt proud. Ranger deserved to be recognized. He had served with unwavering loyalty, saved lives, stood in front of danger, without hesitation. And part of her, perhaps the bigger part, felt afraid. Ranger hadn't been back to that world since his retirement, since his silent retreat into grief and near starvation. He had never once been near a police station again. Would returning there spark something painful in him? Would it pull him back into a memory that broke him once before? Claudia debated whether to tell Leo, but as always, Leo saw more than he let on. "Why are you sad?" he asked that evening, his hand softly stroking Ranger's head. Claudia paused. "I got a letter today." Leo waited. "They want Ranger to go back to the police department, just for a ceremony." Leo's fingers stopped moving. "Back to the cage?" he asked. Claudia's heart cracked. "No, baby, not the shelter, just to say thank you. To honor what he did." Leo looked at Ranger. The dog was dozing peacefully, unaware that ghosts of his past were being spoken aloud again. "He might get sad," Leo said. "I know. Will I go too?" Claudia smiled. "Only if you want to." Leo thought about it for a long time, then nodded. "If he's scared, I'll tell him it's okay, like he did for me." The event was scheduled for the following Saturday. Claudia dressed Leo in a soft blue shirt and navy slacks. Ranger wore a black vest with gold embroidery, retired K9 still on duty in the heart. When they arrived at the police headquarters, Claudia parked far from the main entrance, just in case Ranger needed space. But to her surprise, as soon as Ranger stepped out of the car and sniffed the air, his posture changed. He stood straighter, his ears perked, his eyes sharpened not with fear, but with awareness, and then, slowly, he began to walk toward the building, steady, sure. Inside, officers and civilians filled the auditorium. There was a hush as the doors opened and Ranger entered, tail high, Leo holding the leash beside him. The audience stood. The announcer cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome back Ranger, partner of the late Officer Tom Granger, to receive the Distinguished Canine Service Medal on behalf of his unit and in memory of the years he spent protecting our city." The applause was thunderous. Ranger didn't flinch. Leo guided him to the stage with quiet focus. Claudia stood at the edge of the crowd, hands clenched tightly in front of her, eyes shining with pride and something else, something like fear, that this world might try to reclaim the dog, who had given her son so much. But then she saw Ranger glance toward Leo, just once, as if to say, "I'm here because of you." A tall officer in dress blues approached the podium. He leaned down and clipped the medal to Ranger's vest, and Leo stepped forward, took the microphone in both hands, and said clearly, "Thank you for giving him back to us. He's more than a hero. He's my best." The room fell silent, and then, from somewhere in the back, a voice said, "That boy saved that dog's life." Another officer added, "And that dog saved his." Right back. More applause. No one needed to say more. When the ceremony ended, Claudia expected Ranger to be exhausted, but instead he seemed lighter, as if something inside him had been restored. Not just his pride, but his purpose. That night, at home, Leo drew a Picture of the event: Ranger on a stage, a gold medal on his chest, and Leo beside him. The caption read, "He went back, but he came home." Weeks later, the emotional high faded into the slow, peaceful rhythm of their days again. Leo was accepted into a program for children with autism who showed advanced emotional intelligence through animals. Claudia resumed her remote work. Ranger, though older, still moved through the house like a protector with one eye always on his mission. Until one morning, Claudia awoke to a strange quiet. Ranger usually slept near Leo's room, but he wasn't there. She found him on the porch, curled up in a tight circle. His breathing was shallow. "Ranger," she whispered, dropping to her knees. He opened one eye. His tail wagged faintly. Claudia placed a hand on his chest. It rose slowly. His heartbeat was weak. They rushed him to the vet. The news wasn't unexpected, but it still shattered her age-related heart failure. No trauma, no pain, just time catching up. "He's lived long past the life expectancy for his breed and service." "Histrio," the vet said gently. "You've given him peace. He's held on for as long as he could." Claudia asked for a moment alone with him. Leo stood beside her, eyes brimming. Ranger lifted his head as they entered the room. He didn't whimper, didn't flinch. He simply looked at Leo, then at Claudia. Then, to their shock, he lifted one pawn steady, shaken hand, placed it on Leo's arm. Leo sobbed once, then whispered, "You don't have to stay if it hurts." Claudia blinked through her tears. She had no idea Leo had ever heard those words before, but she knew exactly who he'd learned them from. That night, Ranger passed away in his sleep, curled between Claudia and Leo on the living room rug, his head resting on the boy's lap. His final breath exhaled like a blessing. They buried him beneath the big oak tree in the backyard. Leo placed his drawings in the grave beside him. One in particular showed the two of them walking into the sunset. The caption, scrawled in crooked but careful handwriting, said, "You found me. I'll always find you." And the weeks that followed, the house felt impossibly still. But Leo surprised. "Claudia?" He began waking up early, watering the garden, leaving food out on the porch for strays. One day, he asked if they could volunteer at the shelter again. Marie welcomed them with open arms. The first time Leo stepped back into the kennel area, he paused at the cage that had once held Ranger. It was empty now. Leo didn't cry. He took a deep breath, and then turned to Marie and said, "Do you have another dog who gave up?" She stared at him, stunned. Double quotes. "Yes," she said. "Several." "Okay," Leo whispered. "Let's find one." It had been 2 months since Ranger passed. The mornings still felt quiet, but the silence no longer hurt the way it used to. It had changed, become a softer, more grateful kind of silence. Claudia often found Leo staring out the window, hands tucked under his chin, eyes distant but not lost. He was processing, he was remembering, but he wasn't stuck. Every Saturday, they visited the shelter. It had become their shared ritual. Claudia helped clean kennels, while Leo sat with the dogs. No one else approached. The shy ones, the seniors, the dogs with bite histories. He didn't push them, he just sat, sometimes drawing, sometimes humming, and sometimes something incredible would happen. A bark would soften, a trembling body would scoot an inch closer, a head would lower in trust. Marie called it Leo's silent magic. Claudia simply called it love. One Saturday afternoon, as Leo was sketching beside a skittish shepherd mix named Tucker, Marie approached Claudia in the break room with a sealed manila folder. "I wasn't going to show you this," she said, "but I think it's time." Claudia opened the folder slowly. Inside were adoption requests, dozens of them. Families who had seen Leo and Ranger's story online and wanted to bring a retired canine into their lives. Some had children with special needs. Some were veterans. Some just wanted to help. But at the bottom was a letter that stood out. It wasn't from a family. It was from Detective Glenn Harrow, a former police canine handler from the neighboring county. His partner, Ghost, had served 3 years before suffering a traumatic injury during a warehouse raid. Glenn had tried to keep him, but Ghost's behavior had changed drastically. Night terrors, food aggression, fear of men. With 2 toddlers at home, Glenn had no choice but to surrender him. Now, a year later, Ghost was still unadopted, still aggressive, still unpredictable. But Glenn wrote that something about Leo's story had made him wonder, could this be the chance? Ghost never got it. Claudia's stomach twisted. This wasn't a gentle case. This wasn't a grieving dog like Ranger, soft and quiet. This was trauma, deep trauma, from both dog and human. But before she could say no, Leo walked into the room. He looked at the folder, then at her. "What's his name?" he asked. Claudia hesitated. Ghost. Leo blinked slowly, like invisible, maybe. Like he's still here but not all the way. Leo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I meet him?" Claudia felt her heart lurch. "Baby, he's not like Ranger. He's hurt. He might growl. He might bite." Leo's voice didn't waver. "So was I." The shelter set up the meeting the following week. Extra precautions were taken. Ghost was brought into a reinforced enclosure with 2 handlers present. He was lean, sharpened, and visibly anxious. His ears twitched at every sound. A scar ran across his left shoulder. Leo entered the enclosure slowly, holding a small folded blanket in his hands. One of Ranger's, faded and frayed. Claudia stood, Outside the gate, her breath tight in her chest, Ghost growled low as Leo approached. His hackles lifted, his body stiffened, but Leo didn't flinch. He stopped a few feet away, crouched low, and placed the blanket gently on the ground. Then he said just one thing. "You don't have to talk." "I'll wait." Ghost stared. His ears twitched again. Then, unbelievably, he took one step forward. Claudia covered her mouth. Marie whispered, "That's farther than he's gone for anyone in a year." Leo stayed perfectly still. He didn't reach out, didn't push, he just waited. And Ghost. He lowered his head, not in surrender, but in recognition. Ghost didn't transform overnight. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't lick Leo's face. He didn't curl up beside him like Ranger had. But he also didn't retreat. And for a dog with his history, that alone was a breakthrough. After the first meeting, the shelter staff suggested caution. "He's not ready to leave with you," Marie had said softly. But something's shifting. He saw Leo, and he didn't shut down. Leo asked to return the next day, and the next, and the next. Each time, the process was the same. Leo would sit cross-legged, just inside Ghost's enclosure, the same worn blanket between them. He never brought treats, never gave commands. He just sat, sometimes drawing, sometimes whispering stories, sometimes doing nothing at all, and each time, Ghost crept a little closer. By the end of the first week, he was sitting 3 feet away. By the second week, Leo could hold out a hand, and Ghost would sniff it briefly before backing away. On one visit, Ghost fell asleep. Not deeply, not fully, but his eyes fluttered closed while Leo drew him in soft lines with a stubby pencil. Claudia watched from the other side of the glass, heart caught between fear and awe. She had never seen Leo so calm, so focused, so grounded. Ranger had been his companion, his protector, but Ghost was something different. Ghost was a test. One evening, Claudia sat on Leo's bed after another long day at the shelter. He was holding one of his sketches of ghosts. "He's still scared," Leo said quietly. "So are you sometimes?" Claudia replied, brushing hair from his forehead. Leo nodded. "But Ranger helped me be brave. Now I help Ghost." Claudia smiled. "Do you think he knows that?" Leo didn't answer right away. Then, "I think he feels it." The decision to foster Ghost came with hesitation from all sides. The shelter staff were wary. Ghost had a bite record, a history of unpredictable aggression. Dr. Trent, the therapist who had once observed Ranger and Leo, warned that this would be different. Ranger was grieving. Ghost is surviving. Claudia was terrified, but she looked at her son, his stillness, his intuition, and she remembered something he had said long ago. "You don't have to stay if it hurts." Maybe that was the point. Ghost did hurt, and he stayed anyway, so she said yes. The first day Ghost entered the house, Leo stood in the doorway, waiting. The leash was held by a trained handler. Ghost's body was tense, his eyes darting to every corner. But when he saw Leo, something in his stance shifted. Not relaxed, but aware. He remembered. Leo stepped aside, letting Ghost enter first. And Ghost did. Slowly, carefully, nose to the floor. The house had changed since Ranger. Claudia had removed anything that could cause overstimulation. The furniture was minimal. There was a soft bed in the corner, a bowl of fresh water, and next to it the same blanket Ranger had once used. Leo placed it there himself. Ghost sniffed it once, then lay down. The first week was tense. Ghost barked at sudden sounds. He growled once when Claudia walked too close to his bowl. He didn't touch toys, didn't respond to his name, but he followed. Leo. Not closely, but always with one eye. Leo began to narrate their days out loud, something he had never done before. "We're going to the kitchen now," he'd say softly. "We're getting water. It's okay." Ghost would watch, listen, breathe slower. By the second week, Leo could sit beside him without fear. By the third week, Ghost leaned against Leo's side during one of their drawing sessions, and one night, implanted without fear, Ghost climbed onto the couch, lay down beside the boy, and placed his scarred head gently in Leo's lap. Claudia caught the moment. From the hallway, she didn't take a picture. She didn't say a word. She just let it be. Because some healing doesn't want a spotlight, it wants quiet, it wants time, and that's what they gave him, one step at a time. Ghost's transformation didn't come with fanfare. It came in layers, slow, subtle, and stitched together by trust. He never became the kind of dog who chased tennis balls or rolled over for belly rubs, but he stopped flinching when Claudia opened a cabinet. He no longer barked when the doorbell rang. And one afternoon, when Leo tripped on the porch and scraped his elbow, Ghost without hesitation rushed forward and pressed his body against the boy's side, tail wagging stiffly as if to say, "I've got you." That's when Claudia knew he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was protecting. That summer, Leo and Ghost were accepted into a local therapy dog program, special pilot for trauma recovery pairs. Most people assumed Ghost would never qualify, but the evaluators saw what Leo saw, that the dog didn't need to be flawless to be powerful. His restraint, his sensitivity, his silent intuition, that was his strength. During one session, a young girl with selective mutism sat frozen in a chair, her fingers twisting her hair in tight knots. Ghost was beside Leo, lying still. Without prompting, Leo whispered, "He doesn't talk either, but he understands." The girl looked down. and for the first time all week, she nodded. Word by word, child by child, Ghost began reaching people the way Ranger once had. Not by performing, but by being present. By just being. Claudia often sat on the porch in the evenings, watching them in the yard, Leo sketching, Ghost resting beside him, always close but never intrusive. There was something about their rhythm that felt sacred. It wasn't about fixing anyone, it was about accepting what was real, and gently building from there. One afternoon, Marie visited with a surprise. She brought a box, old and worn, labeled K9 Ranger, retired. Inside were medals, training records, a leather collar, and an envelope. Claudia opened it with trembling hands. It was a letter dated 3 years ago from Officer Tom Granger. If anything ever happens to me, it read, and Ranger is still alive, and someone finds this, please don't put him in a cage. Please try to give him to someone who understands silence. Someone who doesn't need noise to feel loved. He was never just a dog. He was a soul with a mission. And I hope one day, someone lets him finish it. Claudia read the letter aloud that night after dinner. Leo listened, eyes wide. Then he said quietly, he finished it. With me. She hugged him tightly. Later that week, Claudia and Leo returned to the shelter to meet a new Intaka young German shepherd named Rocco, only a year old, but already withdrawn, skittish, afraid of loud voices and sudden movement. Leo sat by. His kennel Ghost lay beside him, and slowly, Rocco crept forward, tail low. The process had begun again, but this time, Leo wasn't just the one being helped, he was leading. That fall, Claudia submitted an essay to a regional journal. It was titled The Dogs Who Taught My Son to Speak. It wasn't long or poetic, just real, honest. About a boy who couldn't find words, a dog who stopped eating, another who didn't know how to trust, and how they all found healing through each other. The essay went viral. A nonprofit offered to sponsor a pilot program based on Leo's method: silence, patience, and presence. They called it Project Red Blanket, after Ranger's old worn cloth, the one Leo had placed in front of Ghost that very first day. The first center opened 6 months later, not in a big city, but in a quiet town, with a fenced yard, a classroom, and a wall covered in drawings made by Leo. Ghost's photo was framed at the front desk. Ranger's collar hung beside it. On opening day, Leo stood in front of a small crowd. He wore the same green shirt with tiny German shepherds he had once worn to school. He didn't give a long speech, he just said, they were broken. So was I. We fixed each other. Now we help others. No one needed more than that sometimes. The most powerful truths don't need decoration, just courage, and love, and time. If this story touched your heart, remember, some heroes don't wear capes or speak a single word, but they still save lives. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes in second chances. Let's keep spreading stories of courage, healing, and the unspoken power of connection.